Hi, Chris DeLeon here of HomeTeamGameDev.com. Main thing I want to share today is the proof of concept approach, why we do that. And this is a thing that even if you don't join Home Team, is going to be useful for you to know so you can apply it in your own things. Now, the nature of proof of concept, as the name hopefully implies, is that you're building something to find out if it's worth building more of it. Most things should never get past proof of concept. And I say should, I mean if you're trying to justify it commercially in terms of investing. If you're just trying to even justify it in your own time, is it worth doubling down on taking further? Usually the answer is no. That's the nature of creative industry. That's the nature of a lot of technical unknowns. What's working, what isn't, what are people responding to? Market's fickle. Now, proof of concept is not quite the same as a whipped out prototype, like just a basic illustration of here's the idea. Proof of concept, in order to prove the concept, needs to be a little bit more coherent and put together than that. A game jam used to be enough for this. Sometimes it still might be. Most of the times, that's not going to cut it. If you're doing something that can be done in a game jam amount of time, anybody else could either have done the same thing. There's thousands of these things getting cranked out all the time. Typically, it's going to take some more time investment. But this is where, like, for example, in Home Team, our project scopes tend to be anywhere from 6 weeks to up to 6 months. In that time, we've got anywhere from 5 to 15 or so people collaborating, building a thing. And all of those are proof of concept in the sense that we're spending no money on them. It's all just being done kind of as exercise, or it's being done to try to feel out the concept and see where it's going. It is being wrapped up enough that we can put it out there. That it has, ideally, of course, what we're working towards, self-explanatory tutorials or help systems in there, enough affordances in the UI to make it clear, click on this, here's what this information means, that it's a wrapped up enough experience that someone can play it and either figure out, I wish there was more invested in this, I wish there was more here, or figure out, I don't. And as long as you approach something in a proof of concept mentality, of that I'm developing these things as sort of, think of fishing lines in the water to see where the fish are biting, then there's no risk involved because you're approaching each one knowing there probably won't be bites, but this is the way that we can kind of safely keep taking shots. And where we can avoid destroying, financial term, right, our runway of, well, heck, if my burn rate of how much I'm spending on paying for asset and paying for art, music, writing, help with those sort of things, if my burn rate is going to tank me in X months and my project doesn't sell enough to keep me going, then I got to stop doing it. And that's where people typically run out of cash way before they find a hit, way before they find an audience, way before they develop the kind of skills to set themselves apart from other people who are also doing the same sort of thing on the same sort of timeline. This is where my favorite example of this, Vision by Proxy, from my background, started as a student project. I wasn't a part of that team. It was a team of 4 students. Made a game in a classroom, a couple of weeks. That game, its proof of traction was it got picked up by Indiecade at E3 many years ago now. And I was not involved with Indiecade, nothing to do with that. Now, I will also say, by the way, if you're watching this video, like literally today while it's new, Indiecade submissions are open till June 1st. There might be able to do it after that with some sort of late fee. If you can do it by June 1st, do it. It's a great year, too. It's fully online. You can do it from anywhere. You don't have to travel. You don't have to play hotel. Sorry for tangent. Now, this game got acknowledged by Indiecade E3. That was their sign, not just that it was worth doubling down on, but gave them a way to make the argument for recruiting me, as I had been making games a lot longer than they had, to help take their thing to another level. So then we rebuilt their game from the ground up. I built a custom engine for it, custom level editor, custom collision system. We got a complete other redraw for the art, brought in a new artist, swapped out some team stuff, gave it some more time. That game got 7 million plays. Way more than that. I mean, the tracker for that went down years ago, but reached 7 before it capped out. That was something that was still freeware. But even there, that, because it had that kind of recognition, gave us the feedback that we can really double down on this. Grew to a team of, I don't know if it was 12 or 18, might have been 18 months, team of 12, something like that, but grew considerably. Brought on somebody helping with writing, brought on another couple artists, gave it a longer development cycle, made a game called Vision by Proxy on the next iteration of that same engine where we added some new features to it. And that was where, by that point, we were being approached from the outside by businesses that wanted to put their logo in front of it to sponsor it on online platforms, companies that wanted to pay us to be able to port it to iPad so they can make the profit off that, etc. And that came from, again, at each level, we were doing something just enough that we were not overextending ourselves to the point that we would lose our balance and fall out of game making if it didn't work. And at the same time, I was doing other things, right? I was never all my eggs in one basket. I was always doing several projects at once so I could lean into the one that was doing the most in terms of its proof of traction. Now, when I say proof of traction, that's where I say there's a bunch of different versions of that, right? That can mean, in that case, that was curatorial. Got picked up. Got accepted, right? Remember this too. When it comes to stuff like this kind of traction, it got picked up. That doesn't come to you. They don't come knocking on your door. You submit your stuff to that. We're really grateful we had a great producer, Andrew Ho, for that project, who was really proactive about submitting this stuff. Also got it a first place in Siege Showcase in the Southeast or something. But you submit your stuff. So like, again, indicate.com/submissions. Go submit your stuff if you haven't yet, and it's still open. I'm now their alumni lead, so I still want you to be a part of our alumni. When you do that, it helps prove traction that curatorial people whose job is to look at a lot of stuff. They look at hundreds of games. They try to say what really stands out, what's going somewhere, what has potential, what's worth talking about. If they say your thing does, you've got some validation to double down on it. And again, you can also use that ticket like they did to recruit someone like me to say, hey, this is worth putting your energy and time into hearing more about. Maybe you want to get involved in this, get on this boat with us. Okay, that's also a case at the proof of concept level where the proof of traction might be YouTube traffic. You put out a video trailer and it takes off. It gets numbers. Might not, but if it does, that again gives you some evidence that there's an audience for this, right? This is where some people, they'll build an email list. Some people will even run ads just cheaply, just to try to see if they can get attention to click on what concepts they're considering. But anyway, you can inform and validate that there is something here. A mentor saying, this is better than your other work. When I did my experimental prototyping stuff for 2007, 2008, I was making a gameplay prototype every night for 7 months. Put all the stuff online, threw some traffic at it, and I had some major spikes of certain games out of those 219 prototypes were getting the most traffic. Not a ton of traffic. Disproportionately more than the other ones. Right? You see the difference? I'm not saying it was like hundreds of thousands of traffic. It wasn't millions of traffic on that page till years later. But some of those games were getting a handful of traffic. Other games were getting in the hundreds, which proportionally was my sign that people were sharing this with each other. That this was sticking. Some people were coming back to this. I took those same ones. That didn't mean I could sell those. That meant that that was my starting point to then build a nicer, more polished version on iPad, on iPhone. Sold those. Those are the ones that got me actually my first Indicate finalist. The ones that got me, paid my rent in downtown San Francisco for a year. Helped get me into graduate school. Variety of things came out of those prototypes. All kinds of great things came out of that process. But it started from experimental proof of concept level. Looking at what I could justify traction on in different formats. And those, again, are different kinds of traction. Some of those were the spikes in traffic. Some of those were someone who I had worked with who I knew was experienced in industry, or someone else who was, I thought, a good measure for a certain category, tastes different than mine. When they said, there's something here, I took that further. And that's that proof of concept mentality. That for the ones that they didn't, I don't see that as wasted work. There's no shortcut past making some scrap. That 6 out of 7 number, part of where I've also heard it, in this case, I think it might have been Klifsky's blog many years ago. I'd also heard it at some point from a marketing guy, and I don't think he had firsthand knowledge, so maybe he's talking out his butt here. But he had actually said one of the ways that Nintendo, and again, I've got no behind-the-scenes knowledge of this, one of his claims is the way Nintendo has maintained their enormously high quality bar was that they actually kill 6 out of 7 projects that they start internally. That what you're seeing is the top 1 out of 7, whatever the percentage works out to be, of all the stuff that they actually start, will they ever let see the light of day? So necessarily, they look like geniuses. Do you see what I mean? No matter who you are, if I hid from you my worst 6 out of 7 videos, my worst 6 out of 7 books I ever came up with, my worst anything, my worst... Heck, that's actually my first ebook I sold, was I took the top 50 of my hobby game dev blog, my weekly writing about game development for 6 years, took those, batched them, categorized them, and the top, cutting off just the best part, looked pretty good. But that's what this proof of concept stuff is about, and that's where, again, so in the home team game dev approach, we're building freeware in large part because that lowers our barrier to collaboration. One of the major challenges that gets into it, besides the fact of like, is it worth spending money on, in the same realm of is it worth spending time on, if you're going to engage with something commercially, with the intent to be able to sell it. Well, and these are things that to a degree can affect non-commercial stuff too, but a lot of rights get really complicated in a way that, well, if you're going to do this stuff correctly, and you want to hire a musician, you want to hire an artist, and that's fair, they're skilled people, you want to pay them for their time and so on. You got a lot of rights to sort out, you're going to have to work with lawyers are expensive, work with an accountants make sure you're making sensible choices. And out of there's all these complexities around like, okay, well, if you want to sell the soundtrack, can you do it without the permission? Do they see any of those royalties? Can they do it without your input? If you want to use parts of that music and make derivative versions of it for a menu, can you do that without paying them extra? If you make a sequel to the game, can you use the music in that sequel without having to pay them extra and have a separate contract? And all these things, there are sensible answers to either. Depends on how they're being paid for it, right? How are they credited? That stuff all goes into there. I'm not a lawyer, not legal advice, but they get even more complicated when it comes to code contributions, when it comes to design work, when it comes to producers, when you get these massive inequalities in skill differences. So we think back to that student team that brought me on board. When they brought me on there, I had way more experience. So some teams will say like, oh, everyone's going to split it equally. My contributions there were disproportionately building off a different foundation of background. It was not a one-to-one. These things get tricky to calculate. And what happens is if you get bogged down with these questions before you even start the project, before you can even start building something, you never even get to the proof of concept phase. You either wind up prematurely spending, which is kind of like a version of premature optimization. For those of you who know, you're supposed to avoid that as an engineer. And so instead, what we do when we say it's freeware, a couple notes about that. One, we know up front, it's in our membership agreement. Everybody knows up front, we're not selling these games. We're not selling these games. They're freeware from day one. Takes a lot of the stress and pressure out of it. The other thing it also has that's nice for us, each individual is keeping rights to their respective stuff. And I mentioned this in a longer video. I'm going to mention here because it's relevant as well. Everybody keeps their stuff. And what I mean by that is we've had musicians who made music for home team games, sold us stuff on iTunes. People have used code in home team games that they wrote. They reuse that code in their commercial side contracts, that kind of stuff. Because you keep the parts that are yours. We've also had cases where someone made game projects, proof of concept style, in our group. Decided from that, out of the games I've led here, out of the games that I was a major contributor on, this is the one I most want to double down on outside of there. Because I have some sign of traction. A mentor said they liked it. I had better numbers there than other things I had done. Outside of there, they can take the parts that they did, remove art or music or bits of functionality done by others, or sort out with them at that point where they've decided that this is something, right, that's worth doing commercially. All home team GameDev asks that we can keep the old freeware, essentially student proof of concept level version freeware up on the site so it doesn't shred portfolios. But they can take and make a deluxe 2.0. But let's say that when you make a puzzle game, and that's the game that gets good traction, you want to take that forward. Maybe the musician in the group, who like everybody else, they were just sort of practicing, doing what they felt like doing, hanging out, chilling, jamming together. If you decided the music in that puzzle game was such a core part of what made it compelling, you know, maybe less so the placeholder art that your collaborators and home team came up with, but the music was really key to it, well, at that point, you are still independent adults outside of the organization, can make a deal with each other, and at that point, because you have a much clearer starting point, that is when you can go sort out and figure out, hey, I would like to buy out your rights to this, or I'd like to come up with some sort of royalty agreement or whatever. Home team's got nothing to do with that. That's you and them discussing things you still each own your full rights to, how you want to reuse it, what you want to sell its use for, etc. Not up to us, still up to you and the people you collaborated with, to the extent that makes sense. I saw someone online that recently discussed, like, well, the reason they're not teaming up is they don't feel like they can pay people who have top tier skills, and you're right. You are 100% right. Don't try to get people who have professional tier skills to do stuff for free. Not how that works. There is somebody else who is at a learning phase, which is to say, often it's not their main skill set. That's where, as long as you're working with people who are at your level, just like you see in student scale projects, people who are at that learning level can collaborate in a way to create a proof of concept, as long as they're all getting out of it what they want in terms of practicing the things that they want to practice, stretching themselves in the ways they want to stretch themselves, making things the way they want to make them. That's tough without the right agreements in place, even then, which is why in Home Team we have that membership agreement. But that's why you see so many teams coming out of DigiPen, USC, Full Sail, Carnegie Mellon, ATC, etc. It's not just, I mean, it's in addition to, they got good teachers, they got good material, they got curriculum, they got expectations, grades, and all that to upkeep. But also it's a space in which people are able to flexibly and creatively experiment and explore with each other, build a thing, under the assumption that this might just be a dead-end class project. This might go nowhere, right? This might get me a B and the quarter's fine, or whatever. Or it might become Outer Wilds, which was, as an example, a game that started out as a USC project, as a student game there, I believe, maybe a thesis project. Got picked up by Indicate, I think. Again, picked up meaning they submitted it. It got approved after it got submitted, so go submit your game at Indicate if you haven't yet. Then, I think the year after that, it got an IGF. It wasn't until years later they got the console ports. It wasn't until years later they got the BAFTA for it. And it all started from that proof of concept model of, well, first let's just make a thing. We'll keep it low pressure. We'll just do a thing because we want to see where this is going. And it's not the only thing any of those people worked on, but out of the things they worked on, it was like, well, here's the one we can build a case around doing more on because it's getting success, it's getting traction, it's getting recognition. But what that proof of concept thing means, and these kind of experimental tests and so on, is that you're doing it in a way you can survive it long enough to figure out where your yield is, that you can do it year round, that you can sustain it. Finding a way that sometimes it was the full job, sometimes I was doing contract work on the side, sometimes I was teaching while doing it, sometimes I was making games professionally while also making my own games on the side. One way or the other, keeping doing it, but that sort of duration is the only way you can accumulate the skills. It increases the odds at any given time the dice are going to land the way you need them to, in terms of the right factors lining up, about timing, about outside things beyond your control working in your favor, about where the attention and the trends are going. But it's about making sure you're doing it sustainably, so you're not burning everything you got on trying to get one made. I remember another publisher I worked with out in New York City. They had us make 4 games: Alice in Bomberland, Games That Blow, iZombie Death March, and another one we never released, so I'm not going to say more about that. But I finished it. And we made these 4 games, and we had a deal with the publisher. We said, okay, well, here's the deal. 2 of these games I'm going to basically direct and make decisions about what's in them. And obviously, we involved them in the feedback. They were still fronting the advances. The other 2 were basically me building their spec. Their CEO had some ideas he wanted to make, so I built what they asked me to. The 2 that did really well out of that 4, again, one we decided not to even release. The 2 that did really well out of that 4 are the ones I designed, I led, and I had more practice doing it, so that makes sense to me. The other one was, frankly, something where, like, this guy had an idea, he wanted to see it happen. It still didn't mean it was a waste of money for him. It meant that it was kind of, I don't mean this derisively, but a lot of designers do this, a vanity project. I want this thing to exist. That's what's interesting to me. I don't care if it doesn't make money. Worth it as an expense. But the VP of sales over at the publisher was talking about, like, man, yeah, in hindsight, we probably should have only made 2 of these games instead of 4 on the budget that we had. But I bet if I had done that, we would have picked the wrong 2 to make. If you had tried to outsmart it and shortcut and not take some variety, you'd pick the wrong ones. And when I did those experimental gameplay prototypes of 7 months of them, I had people tell me, like, well, why don't you just spend all your time, money on one of those? And again, I would have picked the wrong one. So proof of concept mentality, it's just this thing of building stuff in a way you can continue to afford to build stuff, not sinking yourself in the process of doing it. Typically by minimizing cost factor, also still making sure you're still finishing things, releasing things, because also you're getting no new real information if you are dragging out spending a year and a half on a thing without feedback. If you can avoid it, you don't want to do it. There's times and cases where it's justified, or it's a genre where that's the cost of entry is the only way you're going to be able to do it, or you're only able to fit in an hour or 2 a week, in which case maybe that's what it takes to get there. More often than not, you want to try to get something out, get it behind you, get some variety in your, put some fishing poles out in different parts, see where the bites are. And then, I've also seen cases where, out of my previous 2 organizations I helped start before, Home Team GameDev, GameDev at Georgia Tech, or Carnegie Mellon's Game Creation Society, teams that we saw succeed from there, people we saw come out of there and do well, often didn't even take their specific game, but basically think of that proof of concept mentality to, they took their coworkers with them. They took their fellow members from those college clubs in those cases and said, gosh, I've worked with a lot of people in this group, had a chance to interact with a lot of people, and I figured out such and such really gets it done. This person can really animate. This person can really write. This person, when they're the producer, I am confident we're going to ship on time and on quality. Those people get together and kickstart something and can demonstrate they've had the muscle memory of working together before. They have an enormous advantage over somebody who's rolling the dice on, I hope we can make this work, but have never actually proven that yet. So it can be just as relevant on a human factor as it is on a, is this game what the market wants factor? And when I say that example, that's a game where Elsinore by Golden Goat Studio is our best example of that. It's been recognized by IndieCase, it's been recognized by IGF, I believe. Would have actually been, I think, maybe this year when IGF unfortunately got turned upside down because of the pandemic stuff. But Elsinore game, incredible, great team of people. That's again an example of people who kind of found each other through one of these college groups. And Home Team, not a college group, has professional services and mentoring and learning resources as college groups don't, but a similar comparable model of basically a proof of concept. Let's build a thing to build a thing. Let's see what's working. Let's keep trying stuff. Mad Science Lab style. So that's it for today. I know I'm getting a little rambly. This is so core now to how I work that it's hard for me to remember sometimes till I talk about this with other people at this networking thing I'm supposed to be at right after this. Someone just pointed me to on Twitter, somebody coming out of it saying that he wants to make this enormous project. And it just reminds me that not everybody has this proof of concept mentality and appreciation for the value of it and how it can help kind of engage you with the reality of what's working and isn't in an informed way without so much guesswork or fear or risk involved. It doesn't have to be, You can mitigate stuff by doing stuff, thinking by building. It's a whole other topic for a whole day. Chris still on here. HomeTeamGameDev.com is where I encourage you to check out. We've actually had a bunch of applications lately, which I'm excited about, including, I think always a good sign, a number of alumni applying to rejoin. Several of y'all are on the queue. I look forward to getting to. One of them just got in today. Excited about that. I think always it's a good sign when somebody steps away from the group for a while, figures out, nah, that's the way to do it, and comes right back after a little while when it makes sense in their timing, because, yeah, it's good to have y'all back. And aside from that, catch you around. Check out HomeTeamGameDev.com. Apply to build games with us. We got mentors. Oh, and speaking of which, actually, we just got a new, very advanced Unity mentor. So for our Unity leads in particular, Jonas Botel. I don't know if you heard him on the HomeTeamGameDev.com podcast, but core engineer on Subnautica. He's a contract freelance Unity developer across the ocean. And he's now available to consult with for code review, performance optimization, strategic architecture choices about Unity implementation. Meet with our Unity leads like once a quarter each, potentially. Pretty stoked about that. Join us on HomeTeamGameDev.com. Apply. Also, if you haven't submitted to Indiecade yet and you're thinking about it, I encourage you to try it out. It really changed my life, my stuff getting through there. And because it is fully online this year, it is so much more accessible than ever before. There's a discount on it. That cost will definitely go up after June 1st. Whether or not they're still accepting after June 1st, I don't know. That is when the cost will go up at minimum. So check out indiecade.com/submission, see if your stuff makes sense, because it's worth considering. That's it for today. Thanks.